The Dybbuk Box. The crash of a falling 10-foot tall skeleton breaks through the stretched-out cotton spiderwebs placed haphazardly amongst the spindly trees. Its descent smashes in decorative pumpkins and spooks the black cats all in one swift motion. Typical October. Spooky season. The time of Halloween. I've never been one to be obsessed with October. It's the time of year where fall has finally reached us here in Texas, and the weather is finally bearable, at least in the morning hours. The trees are showing signs of hibernation, their leaves a mix of yellows, oranges, and bright reds as they prepare to shed and fill our yards. The morning sunrise takes its time, leaving us to maneuver through our morning still shrouded in darkness that just hints at light on the horizon. The clouds feel heavier at night. The moon shines brighter, somehow. October is the time of year that is celebrated all over the world, none of which are original, just different names for the same ideas, all rooted in some spiritual belief that I have long since forsaken. In Scotland and Ireland, they celebrate a holiday called Samhain, which marks the end of their harvest season. People once believed that during this time, the veil between the living and the dead grew thin, allowing spirits to cross over. Bonfires, disguises, and offerings were meant to keep the wandering souls content. In the town of Galicia, Spain, they have a holiday known as Noche de Kalauskas, or Night of the Pumpkins. It's their version of Halloween, where people carve pumpkins, light candles for spirits, and make a flaming drink called quimera, which is meant as a kind of magical ritual meant to chase away bad spirits with fire and spell work. Then there's Hoptuna, on the island of Man. It's like a Celtic cousin to Halloween, complete with carved tulip lanterns and traditional songs. Children go door to door singing for treats, much like trick-or-treaters, except they're using chants passed down for centuries in the Manx language. Over in the Philippines, there's Panglawaloa, a tradition where groups of children and adults go house to house singing songs for their souls in purgatory. Then, in Diwali, in India, often called the Festival of Lights, families decorate their homes with oil lamps, fireworks, and sweets to celebrate good triumphing over evil and to honor ancestors. Across Europe, All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day are a time where people visit cemeteries, light candles, and decorate graves with flowers to honor the departed. And finally, in Mexico and much across of Latin America, there's Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead. Families build colorful altars, light candles, and bring offerings to graves to welcome back the spirits of loved ones. Then, of course, there's American Halloween, the most commercial and global version of them all. Rooted in old Celtic and Christian traditions, but reshaped by pop culture, its focus is no longer the spiritual and the undead, but it's now a mix of costumes, candy, haunted houses, and horror movies. A holiday many fetishize, but not one I particularly care for anymore. October in America is almost synonymous with Halloween. Yet, because of October's obligatory spooky vibes, I find myself consuming, as much as the rest of the world is at that time, media in the spooky category of genres. My home is decorated, albeit sparsely. My son brought home a small fist-sized pumpkin that has earned a place of honor on our windowsill. The black cat welcome sign has come out of storage and has taken its place on the front door. I recently acquired spooky gnomes to move into our front garden, one whose little white beard is wrapped in mummy casings and another who's drawn on vampire fangs, and the little black cape warn those who pass by our home that there will be candy here on Halloween. I watch horror movies at night about the Appalachian Mountains. They tell us tales of supposedly true stories of supernatural occurrences. They warn me to never whistle or engage with voices calling my name. I would hide from the TV screen as I watched, all the while perfectly aware that what I watched was likely folklore, exaggerated. I recently listened to a podcast that I connected to in particular about a Dybbuk, or a Dybbuk box. I learned that a Dybbuk is a malicious spirit from Jewish folklore, believed to be the soul of a dead person that clings to and possesses a living host, often causing mental distress, and traditionally requires a religious exorcism to be expelled. As a skeptic of the supernatural myself, I still find myself captivated as the podcast told the story of an old antique wine cabinet said to hold the spirit of a Dybbuk, imprisoned to prevent it from attaching itself to a soul of a living person. This cabinet became known as the Dybbuk Box, and the language claimed that anyone who came in contact with it, either by proximity or physical touch, would experience a string of unfortunate events. As I listened to the story, I felt chills run down my spine. It felt familiar, like something I had once seen perhaps, but I would let out a breath of relief as the podcast ended by explaining that the cabinet was, in fact, just an ordinary piece of furniture. The story had been fabricated. Just a spooky story, no real substance to it in the end. So I wear black to commemorate the season, to mourn the summer and its blazing heat and biting mosquitoes. The cicadas have all moved underground to wait out the freeze that is sure to come. I think about October and its many holidays and what they represent. Mostly it's a reflection of some spiritual recourse. They've all come down to the spiritual. And I do not believe in spirits. I never have. We were raised agnostic, which led me to be a natural skeptic. There are no monsters in the closet. Nothing is going to reach out from under your bed and grab your toes. Ghosts are not real, and Bloody Mary isn't going to reach out from your mirror. I became an atheist in high school. I had once and for all decided that anything that had to do with the supernatural was ridiculous, and its concepts were merely work of fiction. I tell myself this still. I do not believe in spirits. Yet there are some things I have experienced that I still cannot explain. A few years ago, my husband and I bought our first home together in October. We were young and broke, had a 2-year-old son, and I was heavily pregnant with our second. My husband's grandfather passed away and left us with just enough money for a down payment for a small 3-bedroom, 2-bath house built in 1956. It was remodeled, poorly, recently, and meant that we could move right in. It wasn't the best house on the block, but it wasn't the worst either. When we first laid eyes on the house, it had just rained. Our excitement to find a house on our price point shrouded our vision as we walked down the cracked cement driveway. Huge, towering oak trees whose width were at least 4 feet in diameter blocked the home's view from the street. The added sidewalk was a level lower than the front porch and was obscured in overgrown hedges that we had to duck past to reach the front door. On the covered front patio, the homeowner would be sitting, 2 small, yapping chihuahuas in each hand, and a heavily used ashtray would be teetering over the edge of her bench armrest. That should have been the first red flag, but we persisted. The inside of the home, upon entry, resembled the pictures we saw very closely. The furniture would be neat, tucked perfectly into each corner. The rugs had dazzling patterns that drew the eye, and the kitchen and its newly installed marble countertops brought a more modern feel to the aging home. With its age, we could still see some of the character preserved in the home with its exposed beams and brick accent wall, although upon closer inspection the brick turned out to be wallpaper. The hall was narrow, with a long, brilliant navy blue runner draping the floor, silencing our steps on the original hardwood floors. Each room of the house created something of a circular circuit. The living room connected to both the kitchen and the hall, and both the kitchen and the hall connected to the 3rd bedroom, which was staged as an office. A realtor made a comment on the odd layout, but our 2-year-old seemed to love it, running in circles along the circuit, giggling as he begged for the 3rd bedroom to be his. His light, toddler footfalls created a clumsy one-person race that vibrated off the body of the house. As my husband and I walked through the rooms, and with our son's excitement still echoing in our ears, we felt a pulling in our chests. The home was telling us our search was at an end. The master bedroom in the back of the house was slightly smaller than the other 2 bedrooms because it needed space to accommodate an attached bathroom. A narrow space only one of us could fit into at a time that had a window facing the neighbor's house from the shower. My husband and I agreed that the room would be perfect, not for us, but my father, who would be moving into the home with us. To be clear, this was a mutual benefit. My father, fresh from a divorce, and us, struggling newlyweds, both needed a little help. We lived with my father to alleviate some of our financial burden, and he lived with us for the companionship. A trip into the backyard opened a forest of opportunity. From the back door we were met with trees, towering at least 20 to 30 feet in height, so dense that sunlight shone through its branches in broken rays, choking out the grass below. It was blanketed in a thick layer of crunchy brown leaves that crackled underfoot. There was an above-ground pool tucked near the home, complete with wooden deck, built specifically to the height of the pool's canvas. Our realtor expressed her envy how the pool was saltwater and that it would be easier to maintain. My husband and I exchanged a knowing glance to one another. Maintenance meant more money. A pool with small children, that equaled an accident waiting to happen. Upon reaching the back fence of the property, we were sold. Our realtor explained to us that the house was taken off the market and the buyer backed out due to finances shortly before closing. The seller was in a rush to sell, so the price had been lowered $30,000 under the market value. We needed to put in an offer fast to secure probably the only home in the neighborhood we could afford. As our feet sank into the mud below us, we made the decision that would turn out to be one of the biggest mistakes of our lives. We closed on our new home the first week of October. The seller moved out the same day we moved in. The house was bigger, emptier, without her furniture lining the walls. I wanted to clean the house before we brought in our things, to make sure that any dust in the home would be our dust, new dust, and it became quickly apparent that the old dust did not want to be exorcised from the many cracks and crevices of our new home. Without the rugs and couches, the original hardwood floors were revealed to be heavily damaged. Each step through the house produced audible creaks, announcing your movement through its space. Cracks the width of a pencil filled with clumps of hair and built-up crumbs. Every single corner of the home was stained black with water damage. Its smell told a different story than the cellar gave, heavily reminiscent of Chihuahua urine. The bedroom with its fluffy gray carpet literally crunched under my bare feet, the smell of cigarettes wafting off of every curtain. The bathroom door, which was propped open when we first viewed the home, kept closing on its home, often slamming abruptly anytime another door or cabinet in the house was opened. And every time we walked through the long hallway, it was as if you were walking through a cloud of a heavy, dank swamp air. Its clinging stench was so overpowering it would often induce nausea. Our work was cut out for us, and there was no turning back. We cleaned as best we could. We spent as little money we had left to replace the carpet, and hired a plumber to fix the smell. They would overcharge us, and the smell would return intermittently, especially after a heavy rain. The windows, we later discovered, were painted shut, yet somehow their permanent closure did little to prevent the outside air from passing through its single panes. In summer, the air was impossible to cool. In winter, the heater would not compete with its icy breath, and the energy the house induced in us was palpable. My husband and I would argue more often. The tension drawn from the house almost ended our marriage. Yet we somehow banded together and agreed that we would endure the house, at least for the next few years, so we could save up for another. With our furniture moved in, and with the birth of our second son, the house slowly became our home. Its walls became, over the years, progressively more cluttered with our things we couldn't seem to let go of. We learned to look the other way, to ignore the house and its dirt, no matter how much you scrubbed, would continue to grow. As our sons grew bigger, the house grew smaller. Each room swallowed up in a mountain of laundry and toys that they never touched. We made efforts to silence the chaos by shutting the bedroom doors to hide their contents. The bathroom door became permanently propped open so it wouldn't lock itself shut again. The hall, which emptied of cluttered in an attempt to lessen and hopefully air out its cloud, was the only room whose doors wanted to be open. Oftentimes, I would be sitting in the living room, and the hallway door would silently slide off its strike plate, the doorknob's bolt never quite in line, no matter how many times my father adjusted it. Through the eye of the open hall door, I could see shadows, probably explained by the reflected light from the living room window, creeping past its walls in the corner of my eye. And although I never ventured into my father's room at the back of the house, it made sure to remind me of its existence in the long afternoon hours in which I was alone. From the couch I could hear metallic clanging, thumping vibrations, and sometimes loud crashes of objects probably toppling over their teetering piles, overcome by their sheer quantity. My father always left the lights, the TV, and one time the sink on and running while he was away at work. I would hear the room's noises issuing from its innards and simply turn my own TV volume up, and I would close the hall door. It didn't feel right to enter the inhabited space of another. At night was when the house truly became alive. My husband and father would be home from work. Dinner would be hot on the table with our toddlers, who still would be running the endless circuit, often ignored. And my husband's Bluetooth speakers would scream out the song Vessel by Red Sex that would reverberate off the walls, trembling with its shrill chords, and its beating bass drum would bounce off the floors, shaking as its rhythm orchestrated the march our sons often followed. The night was our time together, our ritual familiar exchange in which we connected and loved one another, and when the night would darken to a close, we would embrace one another and retire to our rooms for the night of rest and calm. Our boys slept in our bed in our room in the front of the house, not the third bedroom that their belongings shared. This was because within the first week of living in the home, a cat sneaked their way in through the back doggy door and marked its ownership of the boys' room. Its ownership would permeate through the fibers of the carpet and cracks of the walls and make extended periods of stay in the room difficult to breathe in. We had attempted to clean it, but the house absorbed it, clinging to its heavy aroma like a trophy for its steady endurance. So the boys slept in our bedroom, which was less than ideal, but all the warm bodies piled into one bed invited a closeness that proved difficult to replicate in later years. Most nights ended like this, with time together and then retiring to our rooms. My father would have to wake early for work, so he was often the first to sleep, tucked back into his room. The boys would drift off together finally sometime shortly before midnight. We would carry them into our bed, kiss them goodnight, shut the door, and my husband and I would steal away for some alone time in the living room. Those late nights my husband and I shared were treasured, few and far between, as it took a lot of effort and luck to get our sons down. It was one of those few nights, deep into October, that marked us forever. We had just gotten the boys to sleep. The house was silent, the windows seeping with cool October air. the kitchen tiles freezing under our bare feet. We stood at the precipice of the circuit, not quite in the kitchen, but not in the living room either. From where we stood, talking quietly about our plans for Halloween the next day, we had the perfect view of almost the whole circuit. The boys' bedroom doors were both still ajar from that evening's race, and from our focal point, although shrouded in darkness, we could see the living room door to the hallway slowly swaying in the open position on its hinges. We were getting ready to go to bed ourselves and were turning the lights off in the kitchen when we felt it. Soft, tactile, vibrating footsteps toddled from the third bedroom towards us. A cool breeze passed through the gap between our bodies, the floorboards reacting to the steps as it turned the corner of the circuit and faded into the silent hall. My husband's olive-toned face, drained of all its color, told me he heard it too. He grabbed my arm tight and led me to our bedroom, where we found our boys still and fast asleep. My father's snores, echoing from his room, confirmed that we were the only ones walking through our house. Yet, we were not. What we heard was undeniable. It emanated not from the crawl space, not from the ceiling, but from the floorboards. The creaking steps of a child walking the circuit in which we were all too familiar. Undeniably, not only did we both hear its soft footfalls, but felt the air pressure pushing against our knees as it divided the space between us. We could have chalked it up to the October wind pushing through our drafty windows, the fading vibrations explained away as some creature occupying the unseen space of our warped floors. It's just an old house, we would tell ourselves to help us sleep that night. I never did believe in spirits, and rest assured we repeated that spirits are not real over and over to calm ourselves, but rest did not come mercifully. Instead, we locked ourselves in our bedroom and watched as the clock ticked by the minutes towards midnight. The room's walls formed a protective box around us, shielding us from whatever we had experienced. Yet this box felt like it was closing around us, the house swallowing us up and drinking in our despair. I knew in my very being that what we had just experienced was something else entirely and contrary to my very beliefs. Holding my family in my arms, I made the silent decision that it was time for us to leave this place. The heavy silence in the room only to be interrupted by my husband's pinging phone, the calendar reminding us to have a happy Halloween.